Not that song.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Episode 1400 and something. It's been a lot of shows. Oh my gosh, we're at 1450. 1450. Dang. 1450. I used to work. Wow, this is so amazing. I used to work in a radio station, or for a radio station that had that frequency.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
AM 1450. How bizarre. And I was going to talk about someone that used to work on that station today.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
All right, maybe I'm the only one that found that interesting, but let me tell you that it's a blessing that I am talking to you via the internet waves. Wait, what do we call these things that come to you, that bring you the internet? Rays?
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Internet rays. At any rate, it's data packets that are being fed to you to listen to this
Mike's
wonderful program.
Daily
It's one and only
Podcast.
Mike's Daily Podcast today.
Yeah!
And today we're in Podcastro Valentino, the last place on earth, Café Anyway. My name is Mike Matthews. We bring this show to you just about every day. I am going to bring you a segment called A Fine Article. Look at Wyatt! Hello, Mike and Master. It's Madame Rootabega. Happy Sunday and Oktoberfest. Ooh! Yeah, today is the first day of October, which technically does not mean Oktoberfest. The Germans celebrate Oktoberfest in September. Look who else walked in.
Hello there, Mike. This is Valentino, the Bear King attending.
And this is Bison Bentley. Do you know that?
Mike, we really enjoy being here because on the East Coast,
And here's today's podcast picture.
well, that's far away there.
Yeah, East Coast. Do you know that? That's true. The point of that was, I guess you can draw your own conclusions. The podcast picture today is of my mom's pool. Why do I have a picture of my mom's pool? Because that's where I spent most of my vacation a couple weeks ago in Daytona Beach. And that pool has survived many, many hurricanes. And it survived the recent hurricane. And I just wanted to show you a picture of it. So I hope you like it. Mike'sDailyPodcast.com. Now, I would like to just jump into this little thing. We were talking about 1450. It was called The Boomer. It was also called KVEN. And as I worked, I didn't work actually for that station, although some of the commercials I produced got played on that station. I actually worked for its sister station called KHEY, the country station. Perhaps you heard me on that station years ago. Perhaps not. But that's where the Santa Fe Cafe came from, was KHEY. And a certain guy by the name of Barry Turnbull used to compliment me constantly about how I did the Santa Fe Cafe. He would tune in. He liked country music. He loved oldies. And when KVEN turned from a news talk station to an oldies station, he was over the moon. And that is where I got to know Barry over quite a few years. I knew him at least over a decade. Worked with him for over a decade. He worked as a sports announcer, commentator, and a talk show host. Talked sports with local sports celebrities or coaches, high school coaches in the area in Ventura County. And he'd have them on this show that he'd do about, I think, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, weekdays. And I would be in the room next door, in the studio next door, working on commercials. So we would meet in the hall and talk, and he would talk about sports, and he knew I didn't know a thing about sports, and instead he would shift his conversation to music because he loved music, and he was actually related to some of the Beach Boys. So he had some stories about that. He loved Disneyland. He turned me on to some websites that had to do with Disneyland, that, you know, some of the forgotten lore of Disneyland. He worked there, as a matter of fact, for a while. Barry passed away just a few weeks ago, and I was so shocked to hear about that. And saddened. He had just talked to me on Facebook. He had I think I'd wished him a happy birthday, and he commented below, hey, remember when we used to work right next door to each other? So that was another era that came a few years after that sports show took place and KVN turned into a oldie station. Barry would do these hourly and half-hourly news reports. And he did it from the studio that was right next to the studio that I was. This time, though, we had a window that we could see each other through that connected the two studios. And there'd be a song on, and he'd get up and he'd start dancing in the studio. And then he'd wave at me, and he'd be like pointing up in the air at the speakers saying, hey, because he knew I couldn't hear it in my room. So then there was a button on the board that I could hit, and I would hear what song he was playing. You know, it'd be like Louie Louie, or the Four Tops, or the Box Tops, or the Some Tops, some sort of Tops band that was Top of the Pops performing. And he'd be dancing to it. Beach Boys, of course, because he was related to them. And we had a lot of conversations, and Barry was not stingy with the compliments. He would always give me compliments. When I started dating what would become my ex-wife, he, would she would stop by and he would talk to her, and he, just the nicest guy. And it's so sad to hear of his passing. Especially, too, and that's the strange thing about Facebook, is that we spoke on Facebook very recently. And that was the last time I talked to him. But anyway, very sad news about that. I've lost quite a few people from that era of radio. Matt Cooper, who was very, very young, passed away just a few years back. And he actually was a podcaster, had a podcast called Pod Zeppelin. And he gave me some tips when I was starting to podcast that were very helpful. And we saw each other every day for a while. And he taught me a lot about the producing side of audio and how to do cool things that before I had no concept of. And he was younger than me, and he just was a really smart, creative guy. There was a guy named Alan Jay, who we lost quite a while ago, but I used to talk to him, see him every night. And then Lee Marshall, who was the voice of Tony the Tiger, and who was just the nicest guy, was in charge of that oldie station. And he would give me tips about, he would hear Santa Fe Cafe, and he would tell me things like, as a voiceover artist, which he was, he would say, hey, those characters that you create, those are gold. That's great. You can do an impression of this guy, this guy, this guy. But, the people that you make up, not the celebrities you do the impression of, those are the ones that are gold. So thinking about radio people that we've lost. And then also someone that, and this is the last I wanted to mention Monty Hall, who passed away, but there was someone who was not famous, but had many, many friends and loved ones. And he passed away earlier this year, Tony Abuelos. And I didn't see him a lot. I didn't work with him. I'd see him every couple of months. And I only got to know him about 5 years ago. But he passed away much too young, and just the nicest guy. And it was so funny because he was Hispanic, and he was at a graduation at Berkeley because his niece graduated from there. The niece, Ariel, who you hear say, here's today's podcast picture, and who comes on the end of the podcast, and who actually lived with my wife and I for a couple of years back when I was married. And when she graduated from Berkeley, Tony was there, and Tony was sitting next to me. We were here in the stands in Berkeley watching it, and Steve Wozniak got up and gave the keynote speech. And Tony, who I had no concept, was a total conservative. And he goes, oh, Steve Wozniak, he's such a freaking liberal. And it was funny because he was Hispanic and, totally was disgusted by illegal immigrants who came to the U.S. and all that. So anyway, wanted to remember those people today on this Sunday show. But also Monty Hall, who I grew up with, because as a kid, my parents would watch that show, Let's Make a Deal. And Mark Davis, who I work with in radio, wrote the following on Facebook. I thought I would quote him. We lost an American original today. This is actually yesterday. Monty Hall passed away at the age of 96. Wow. Let's Make a Deal is a show that still makes me laugh and smile to this day. We got to see a little bit of all of us on that show. And we always cheered him on and tried to choose the right door or box Carol Merrill was standing in front of. You could become any character on that show and no one cared. Thanks for the memories, Monty Hall. You'll be killing them in heaven throughout the ages. R.I.P. You know what? Let's Make a Deal. People, the contestants on the show, the audience members, everybody was dressed up in a costume. And this show, I think, was a daily show. And Monty Hall just totally rolled with, I mean, these were not scripted shows, and he would just, anything would pop into his head. And it was some great improv back in the 70s to watch on television. So Monty Hall passed away. That's who that is, if you didn't know who Monty Hall was. And some other interesting people that I have met throughout the ages. Okay. Will Shortz is still alive. Will Shortz puts together the New York Times crossword puzzle, and he is on NPR on the Sunday morning show of the Weekend Edition show with Lourdes Garcia Navarro, and he will do a puzzle. And what's fascinating is it's over the radio, so you don't see any of this. You're hearing it and then making a mental image, kind of like what I do with this show, with the sound effects and whatnot. But what he does is, and I'm so hooked on this now, even though I'm not the biggest fan of puzzle games and whatnot, but my gosh, he does these things that he leaves when his segment is done. His segment lasts about 5 minutes, and they'll grab someone who answered the question from the week before, and then they'll do like a contest on the air. Like today's was celebrities whose first name is also a city. And he would say, like, drop a hint, and it would be Austin Powers. And Austin, of course, Austin, Texas. Or Olympia Dukakis, Olympia, the capital of Washington, and on. So, but today, so he leaves the segment with a bizarre puzzle, and it's always something, think of a phrase that's popular in today's society. Then take the last letter, swap it with the first letter, then add and subtract a letter, then flip those letters across, and then upside down, go backwards, spin around in one, then bury it in the backyard, and then come back 3 weeks from now and tell me what you... It's always something so complicated. But I love Will Shortz. And I love the smell of fall in the air as I segue all over the place on my Segway, which I do not have a Segway. But, you know, Segways are now those things that you see in famous towns with lots of landmarks. San Francisco, for example, you see a bunch of people with their helmets on Segways. It's all part of the Segway tours. So you can be as fat as you want and never have to take a step. Which, believe me, now I'm kind of wishing I had a Segway, because my right foot has been hurting me for the past couple of weeks. It's like that little section of the foot connected to your ankle. That little, not the ankle, but like below the ankle. That area is hurting me lately. So I'm taking some glucosamine. But if this doesn't go away, I'm thinking too I might need to buy some new shoes. That's just a thought process. Speaking of shoes, Jennifer Hudson, someone threw a shoe at her in a concert she was doing yesterday or the day before, and she says she takes it as a compliment, because apparently that's what she did on The Voice, that she was a judge, she threw a shoe at someone. Boy, The Voice sure is churning out the pop artists, isn't it? You can't turn on the radio any time of day. You're hearing people that won on The Voice. That's me being facetious. You never hear anyone that won on The Voice, ever. But sometimes American Idol. All right, and one other thing I wanted to point out, as the smell of fall overwhelms us, overtakes us all, and it smells so nice. Trader Joe's sent out their... Now, I live in California. I live in a part of California where there's a Trader Joe's. There's, like, within an easy drive, I can get to, like, 3 or 4 Trader Joe's. Whereas back in the day when I lived in Huntsville, Alabama, I'd have to drive an hour and a half north to Nashville to get to a Trader Joe's. And that was only after I'd lived there for a year and a half. But Trader Joe's sends out this thing called the mailer, the Fearless Mailer, or the Fearless something or other. And they wrote something here in their description of organic blackstrap molasses, which is, by the way, the sexiest name I've ever heard. I don't know what this thing is, blackstrap molasses. I know it's some unpurified form of molasses, but just the name itself is so sexy. And in fact, you can hear a song that was inspired by the name by Angelina. Oh, what the hell is her name? Angela. Anyway, it's somebody I interviewed. Café Anyway.
Burger Master.
On Mike's Daily Podcast. And you can find that at mikesdailypodcast.com under the interviews section. Interviews A through M, I think it is. I alphabetized by the first name. And she did a song called Blackstrap Molasses that you can hear at mikesdailypodcast.com. Also at mikesdailypodcast.com, you can help us out through the Amazon link, buy whatever it is you're going to buy, and that helps us out. There's also a PayPal link there too. You'll become an inglorious Mike's Daily Podcaster and get a special greeting from all the Café Anyway characters, which I have to be honest with you, I'm feeling a little weird with Valentino and Bison Bentley these days. I know that Valentino and Bison Bentley, if I may paint a picture for you, they are very conservative. And they like Trump, but they really wanted Chris Christie to win. That's the basic character, a broad stroke of what these two characters are about. But after that, I can't think of anything else that would pertain to Valentino and Bison Bentley. I'm struggling. I know they're from the East Coast. As they mentioned earlier, they were happy they were not on the East Coast, which I was just on the East Coast and I found it quite nice. So I don't know why they're having these feelings of anti-East Coastness. But that's it. So if you have any suggestions for the character development of Valentino and Bison Bentley, please let me know. mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com is where you can email me, or you can call me at 336-MM-DAILY. That's 336-MM-DAILY. But back to this Trader Joe's description of organic blackstrap molasses. We are known, it says, as a limited SKU grocery store, SKU. And it says SKU is industry shorthand for stock keeping unit, which is longhand for product. As such, we can't carry everything you'll find in a big box supermarket. We don't have the space, and that's just not who we are. So we know there will always be stuff you need that you can't find at Trader Joe's. One hope is that you come to us first for the things we do have that you love. I'm trying to put the stuff in italics, the italicized words. I'm trying to give them a certain accent that I don't think is quite being conveyed through this audio podcast, but maybe you're getting it. With all this as the backstory, it's also important to remember that when a great many customers actively take the time to ask us to offer a particular item, we take notice. And we do what we can to make it a reality. That's an entire paragraph that doesn't even describe organic blackstrap molasses. But it does describe Trader Joe's. And actually, the next paragraph, they then begin to describe organic blackstrap molasses. But I find that fascinating. Trader Joe's is highly successful. I will go there to get my produce because getting it at Costco, I end up with crap. I just bought a whole bag of onions, and they're like, I get home, and even though they didn't feel mushy at the Costco, they're now feeling mushy at home. And I didn't drop water on them or anything, so there's no reason why they'd be mushy, and I don't live in a very moist climate. It's quite dry here in the Bay Area. Well, in the East Bay anyway. And I like the produce at Trader Joe's. Like, the apples are always good. I never get a bad apple. like I get bad apples at Costco all the time and other places. So, Trader Joe's, that description that they just gave in that paragraph, I think is very important to bring up right now in our economy today. Because Trader Joe's does very well, as does their, one of the stores that they are partnered with, Aldi's, which they've been in America for a while. They're huge in Germany. And there's another store from Germany that just began their grand opening somewhere not here in California. But that's also going to be a new chain, following this similar model, where people go into Trader Joe's, and basically the whole plan is you can walk up one aisle and get basically everything you need and then leave. I have very seldom had a bad experience. The last bad experience I had at Trader Joe's was I went in there, the one in Fremont, and there was a guy walking around and seemed to always be walking near me, and the dude has probably never ever taken a bath. Oh my God, he stunk to high heaven. Oh, that was bad, that smell. I wanted to direct him to the Trader Joe's soap aisle, which actually, that aisle makes no sense to me, because why would you buy their stuff? Oh, because it's environmentally friendly, I guess. But what's it, Tom's of Maine? That stuff, I used to use that as deodorant, and I stunk to high heaven. Does not work very well. At any rate, that was what I wanted to bring up. Trader Joe's, it's a thing that's growing and growing, and they're growing all across the nation. Interestingly enough, Daytona Beach has a Trader Joe's warehouse, but they don't have a Trader Joe's store. So you can't buy anything from Trader Joe's, because that stuff in the warehouse is going to Trader Joe's stores elsewhere in Florida. But I bring up Daytona Beach because, well, the podcast picture was the pool. And I forgot to mention when I've been talking about Daytona Beach, and I was there right after Irma, that it tore off a lot of leaves, and what leaves were left were brown. It thrashed. It really caused a lot of plant death, I guess you could say, as well as bug death. I noticed not a lot of bugs while I was there. Usually when I'm in Florida, lots of bugs all over the place. But not to say that Florida was brown overall. There was still a lot of greenery. But I heard also a thing on the Weekend Edition show this morning that Puerto Rico is now very brown after Maria blew through there. But they did say that greenery will be back within 3 years. It will come back because it grows like crazy in Puerto Rico. It grows like crazy in Florida. And that's... Oh, one other thing. This is the last thing. Portlandia. I've been watching this lately. If you have Netflix, it's bizarre comedy, but it's like you get a little trip to Portland when you watch it. And I find Carrie Brownstein just hilarious. I will take her over Sarah Silverman any day. Her comedy, I love Carrie Brownstein. And just her smile, her laugh, her jokes. Fred Armisen, very funny too. But they did a whole thing about the theme music you hear on premium cable shows. How they all sound the same thing, slide guitar, kind of a gravelly voice singer. It all goes back to The Sopranos and True Blood, and all these shows have that same kind of edgy, backwoods sort of sound. Oh, this wasn't a premium cable show, but My Name is Earl had that same kind of soundtrack. It sounds sort of like Beck's song, Loser. And I'm a loser, baby. And how so many of those shows, those premium cable shows, have that kind of music. I'm not a fan of all these shows people love, like Breaking Bad. And I've just, the HBO shows that everybody raves about, the kind of edgy Netflix shows, the edgy AMC shows, not a fan. I don't understand edgy. I don't understand why watching something edgy in any way fulfills you. This is 2017. Edgy does not mean what it meant to, when we were in high school in the 80s, some of you. Edgy was, ooh, cool, wow. oh, you got to see this comedy, this movie. It's edgy. You got to watch HBO because it's edgy. It's like, who cares now? But people, so they dropped the F-bomb a bunch. Who cares? I don't get it. I get fulfilled from information and news and things I didn't know, which we're going to try to get to a little bit of that right now on the segment called
A Fine Article.
You silly great fat article.
First off, you've been hearing a lot about tax reform and Trump's idea for tax reform. Well, Charles Schumer today told House Speaker Paul Ryan to get real on tax reform following the Republican unveiling of its plan to overhaul the tax system. Quote, GOP hashtag tax reform plan and what at Speaker Ryan says about it are two different things. Says plan is for middle class, but 80% is for the wealthy. Get real, Paul, Chuck Schumer said. President Trump and congressional Republicans last week unveiled the framework for a new tax plan, which includes cutting the number of individual tax rates and lowering the corporate tax rate. Trump has billed the plan as one aimed at helping the middle class. But Ryan, during an appearance on Face the Nation, would not promise that every individual in the middle class would receive a tax cut under the new plan. Well, I don't know every single person's little small problem or issue, he said. So yes, people are going to get tax cuts. How big are those tax cuts? That depends on the individual. So when it comes to touting the successes of his first months in office, Trump often boasts about the SC in his tweets, the Supreme Court, and the contentious confirmation of Neil Gorsuch. But what a shaky conservative majority in place. The justices are poised to give a hard legal look in the coming months to the president and his party's policies in a new term that could either fuel or significantly set back the administration's political and legislative momentum. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said at an event last week with a slight smile, there's only one prediction that's entirely safe for the upcoming term, that it will be momentous. The prospect of a resignation or two adds an extra layer of drama and unpredictability surrounding the session, and it kicks off tomorrow. It will begin its work with a full bench and a full plate of hot-button cases, including Trump's executive order on an earlier version of his so-called travel ban. Speaking of Trump, he said today that he told the top U.S. diplomat, Rex Tillerson, not to waste his time trying to negotiate with Kim Jong-un. I told Rex Tillerson, our wonderful Secretary of State, that he is wasting his time trying to negotiate with Little Rocket Man, as he likes to call him. And he called him during that UN speech he gave recently. Trump's comments came the day after Tillerson disclosed that the U.S. was directly communicating with North Korea on its nuclear and missile programs, but that Pyongyang had no interest in dialogue. Save your energy, Rex. We'll do what has to be done, Trump said. Tillerson said during a trip to China yesterday that the U.S. had multiple direct channels of communication with Pyongyang, the first such disclosure from the Trump administration, and that it was probing North Korea to see whether it is interested in dialogue. Tillerson actually expressed hope for reducing tensions in North Korea, which is fast advancing toward its goal of developing a nuclear-tipped missile capable of hitting the U.S. mainland. Yesterday there was talk that they were moving their missiles. So let's see. Donald Trump also said today he scoffed at politically motivated ingrates who had questioned his administration's commitment to rebuilding Puerto Rico after a pulverizing hurricane, and said the federal government had done a great job with the almost impossible situation. The tweets from a president ensconced in his New Jersey golf club for the weekend. And San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz, who is lovely, by the way. I don't know if you've seen pictures of her. Very, very attractive. She accused the Trump administration of killing us with the inefficiency after the storm. She begged the president, who is set to visit Puerto Rico Tuesday, to make sure somebody is in charge that is up to the task of saving lives and appealing for help to save us from dying. She said Sunday that there's only one goal, and that it's saving lives, adding that all she did was ask for help. As we go outside of Café Anyway, where we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcaster Valley. I know the good heart of the American people, and I know that when a Mayday sound goes off, they come to the rescue, she said in a television interview. Speaking of disasters, a flotilla of boats was headed to the Pacific island of Vanuatu today as efforts got underway to evacuate all 11,000 residents because of an erupting volcano. Globs of lava were seen flying as far as 300 feet every few seconds. The eruption has polluted water sources on the island, leaving thousands in need of safe water. The Madame Rootabega volcano began rumbling in September. And then finally, as we zip through these last stories here, there was someone that pulled a gun on to help evacuate a nursing home in Texas, Lake Arthur Place nursing home. His team of volunteers, they're called the Cajun Navy. They showed up to rescue people. He said that the nursing home's administrator, Jeff Rosetta, got in his way. They, I guess, got physical, not in the way that maybe you are going to be getting physical with someone tonight on a Sunday night. I don't know. Maybe it gets romantic at your place. If it does, good for you. No, and then actually pulled a gun at one point to help evacuate the nursing home. Mark Zuckerberg said he regretted dismissing concerns about the Facebook's role in influencing the U.S. presidential race. His latest acknowledgement that misinformation on the platform has affected elections. He had brushed aside charges that Facebook had an impact on the race. This was shortly after the election last year, calling it a pretty crazy idea and saying that voters make decisions based on their lived experiences. But in a post Wednesday, he directly responded to Donald Trump's tweet labeling Facebook anti-Trump. Zuckerberg expressed remorse for his earlier statements rejecting concerns about the dangers of propaganda and fake news on Facebook. He also had mentioned that then President Obama had warned him before the election that there was something going on with the Russian influence. Russian ads spread controversial views on topics such as immigration and race and promoted 470 inauthentic pages and accounts. According to Facebook's own description, the disclosure has added fuel to the findings of U.S. intelligence officials that Russia was involved in influencing Trump's race against Hillary Clinton. Leaks this week have further suggested that the ads targeted groups like Black Lives Matter in an effort to exploit racial divisions and may have focused on audiences in specific locations, including Ferguson and Baltimore, the center of major police brutality protests. And finally, smart billboards are checking you out and making judgments, according to the Tribune News Service. Smart digital billboards are going to detect the make, model, and year of oncoming vehicles and project ads tailored to the motorist, the same way that ads on the internet are tailored to you now. Roadside cameras will read license plates, and powerful computers will make snap judgments based on likely home address, age, race, and income level to pitch products or services through the billboards. These very racist billboards. Once ads flash up on roadside digital screens, the sales pitch may not stop. Any mobile phone in a passing vehicle may light up with a reinforcing message linked to that ad. And to that, I think we must all say no. No, no, no. Do not make a snap judgment about me. If that makes a snap judgment about me and posts a picture of a guy eating Doritos, sitting on a couch, watching sports, I'll be very upset. By the way, everybody's watching sports this weekend, or a lot of people. I don't think that's a healthy lifestyle. I'm thinking it's an irony that people that are into sports and like people doing sports end up being some of the most unhealthy people on the planet. And maybe that should change. And maybe we should have an ad on a billboard about that. That what I would be okay with. And that's the end of the show. Wow. We went for about 35 minutes on this show today. I hope some of it was informative. You got to see a little bit behind the curtain of Mike into my life and what it's like being a guy that's been in radio for over 30 years. Discovered podcasting in 2009 and will continue podcasting until I'm dead. Deed, as Austin Powers said. Oh, no, wait, it was the character Mike Myers played in So I Married an Axe Murderer. That's right. By the way, someone said to me last week that I look like Dr. Evil. And I guess I'll take that as a compliment, as Jennifer Hudson took a shoe thrown at her as a compliment. Why not? Next show, it is going to be some more developed characters that you have heard on the show before. Chely Shoehart, Floyd the Floorman, and John Deere the Engineer. And if you'd like to comment, you can call me 336MM Daily. That's 336MM Daily. Talk to you soon.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com.
Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com.